So we had a great discussion, and one reason why we did is we had so many knowledgeable people in the room who attended who had their own experiences about what to do to try to make their companies more energy efficient. And so the challenge was to try to take the great ideas that people were coming up with and try to distill them down into one or two points that you could take away and take back to your companies. So we failed at the one or two, we came up with 5. But they are concrete and usable, we think. And so Eric and Amory are going to go over those now quickly for you.
Great. Yeah, as Jennifer said, we had a great discussion. I think everyone agreed that the size of the opportunity, the impact that we have on energy efficiency is huge, and that companies are doing a lot. In fact, if you take a look at the last few years, you can see that just a huge amount of benefit in terms of reduction of electricity and energy use by companies and commercial buildings, et cetera. But we really talked about, so we moved quickly on to what can companies do. And I think there were 5 things. One is that this market is changing very quickly. The technology is changing, the way buildings are designed is changing rapidly, and executives really need to pay attention to the opportunity that's out there. If you haven't taken a look at major energy efficiency type programs in the past couple of years, there's probably a big opportunity in your company. That's how fast things are changing. We also talked, there were a couple of companies that talked about the idea of embedding the energy efficiency into the culture, much like safety, and the companies that are embedding that in their factories and in their day-to-day operations are having a much bigger impact. The second thing was most companies don't really have a good baseline, so they don't really know where they stand in terms of energy use for electricity and gas and fuel oil and things. So you got to start by having some kind of a baseline, and there's technologies out there that will help you with that. And then with that, you need to set targets around energy, around water, around waste, around CO2, et cetera. If you don't know where you're starting and you don't have some targets, you're not really going to make a big step change. And we believe, the group believe, that there are big step changes out there. And in fact, a lot of good companies out there now are not only setting targets, but making those targets public. The third thing is really rewarding innovation and the efforts of risk-taking. There's a lot of new ideas out there, and typically we haven't rewarded people for saving energy and for energy efficiency, and a lot of companies have good examples around that.
Amory even mentioned, I'll interject quickly, about even rewarding a goof of the month prize, where you're so encouraging people to come along and come up with ideas, even take risks that if it doesn't work, that's okay. But what you're trying to do is to instill the idea that we're all in this together, and to try to come up with ideas that may work, may not, but could be game changers along the way if they do.
The other thing we talked about was a lot of times people try to look at energy efficiency projects as part of their capital budgeting, and it often gets moved to the bottom of the pile, and so they don't happen. And we heard some good stories about companies that were actually embedding it in their operational planning, so that every year your operations are expected to have a certain amount of energy efficiency, and that was really driving a lot of change. And I think finally we talked about the integration of technology and design that can have a huge impact. Typically people have thought about putting new technologies around lighting or building automation or energy management systems, and those can have a big impact. Or taking a look at new building designs and what those can have. But if you integrate the two, the opportunities are much bigger. Typically you can take the opportunity from 20 to 30% savings to over 50% if you do that well. And in line with that, we talked about the LEAD program, which we felt was having just a huge impact on driving transformation and energy efficiency.
And in fact, Eric was saying at his own company, at Siemens Corporation, the employees themselves have so bought in that they want to work in a LEED design building. And Amory is going to talk about, we were asking him he has some great examples of how this can be instilled in companies, and we were going to ask him to give a good example of one of these in which these recommendations below were integrated.
Energy productivity has already doubled in the United States since '75, and we can triple it again with terrific returns. In buildings, the net present value opportunity is $1.4 trillion with a 33% IRR. So the savings are worth 4 times their cost. In industry, the opportunity is doubled energy productivity, 21% IRR. And a lot of that is due to a headline called integrative design that can often make big savings cheaper than small savings. So you get expanding returns, not diminishing returns. Firms like Eric are figuring out how to practice that. We had a nice example in the Empire State Building 2 years ago. saving over 2/5 of the energy in a difficult retrofit with a 3-year payback, or in an industrial pumping loop, saving at least 86% of the pumping energy with lower capital cost just by using fat, short, straight pipes instead of skinny, long, crooked pipes. In our industrial practice, the last $30 billion worth of projects, we're typically getting 30 to 60% energy savings with 2 or 3 year paybacks on retrofit, and in the new facilities, 40 to 90% with almost always lower capital cost, and not just incrementally lower. Texas Instruments chip fab in Richardson, Texas was built in Texas, not China, saving over 1,000 high-tech American jobs, because together we were able to cut out 30% or $230 million of capital cost. And that's just the beginning. These technologies and design methods and delivery methods, financing methods, keep innovating even faster than all of the supply side stuff that we heard about in most of this conference.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Great